talk?
Yep.
Here we go.
Okay, great. 7:01, I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Westford Public Schools School Committee for Monday, June 3rd. This meeting is being recorded. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us standing if you're able. The Pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. There's a bunch of warrants in there. There is a proposed meeting schedule for FY25, and there is also administration exempt and non-union salary approvals. Any questions or comments on the consent agenda?
No.
Okay, a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Right over. I'll give that to Mari.
There you go.
And a second.
Second.
Okay, great.
We'll shares.
Okay. Any last comments?
Trying to be.
All in favor, please raise your hand. 7 of us. Thank you. Next on our agenda is student recognition. So looks like we're missing both of our student reps tonight, but we do just want to, if they were here, we would have
Right.
had a little token of our appreciation for them. As you know, we get a member from our student council and a member from our student advisory council, both seniors who join us, and we appreciate their input. I think there's been a couple of conversations, especially with the budget, to make sure that we were a flowing of information to WA and back. Obviously, I think they weighed in quite a bit during the DC field trip conversation, so it's always great to have their voices at the table, and we will miss them and wish them luck in their future work.
Right. We do have 2 gifts for them, so if they're watching at home, make sure you get these to you. They're very nice.
Just edit that in later.
And I also just want to say, I think we appreciate both of what Misha and Alex have contributed.
Yep.
Because we've watched it grow over the last couple of years, which I think has been fantastic. That their voice, you know, the student voice has become more consistent, although they're not here tonight. But in participating beyond just the typical updates of old. You know,
And I think it's
appreciate
cool.
it.
I think it's cool too how we have one of the members of STAC,
Yeah.
because we are able to build that relationship throughout the year, right? Like, and Misha has looped. Like, she was the STAC rep
That's right.
junior year,
Yeah.
and then senior year. So I feel like we've really been able to build a relationship, which
Yeah.
is helpful and great. So,
But we wish them both the best, and we will make sure that we get these gifts to them.
yes, great. All right,
We
thank
definitely
you.
need them for their dorm rooms or.
Right.
Next is public comment. A reminder that public comment for any item or topic on or off the agenda is always available near the top of the agenda for individuals to share their thoughts. Speakers will be limited to 2 minutes per person. Please use public comment even if you refer to something later on the agenda. Virtual public comment is available through Zoom. Raise your hand and you'll be promoted and unmuted, or in person at the microphone in the conference room. Just give a minute to see if
Nobody here. Are we ahead?
Are we? Yep, well, 7:04.
Yep.
Okay, looks like none tonight. So we'll move on to informational updates.
Sure.
Start with the superintendent.
So Principal Toomey sent out a scheduling update to families this afternoon. Probably one of the highlights being that they anticipate that the students are going to, that the schedule is going to be posted on June 11th. So when there was a question as to whether they were even going to get them before the end of the school year, they are optimistic that they will be able to do that. And then in that update, they've also outlined when students will be able to meet with counselors as well too. And there's some just some additional information in there.
Like office hours.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. As I mentioned in my June update, Friday we had the Westford and Friends Invitational at Westford Academy, and it was incredible. That was something that not only is it an amazing event to witness, I know all of the students who participate provide a lot of great feedback about it as well too. And one of the exciting things is that they're already talking about the work that with the success that they've had with the unified track and field. They're eager to see if they can potentially get a basketball team next year as well too, which I think will be excellent. Some of our 8th grade students actually presented their civic action projects that I mentioned in my update on Saturday. They actually presented them at the DCU Center. They were invited to join 8th graders from around the state to share their work. So that's kind of a really exciting thing that took place today. And yes, we have pictures there from the students who were able to attend, so we want to congratulate them and thank them for their work. Let me see. Graduation is planned for Friday, right? Weather permitting.
Weather permitting.
It does right now. If you just look at if you look at your weather app right now, it does not look good for Friday, Saturday, or Sunday.
Yeah.
Or
But
Monday or
if-
Tuesday.
Right, I know. If we dive
Mine is
into it,
okay.
I'm hopeful that the hours that we need it to be bright and sunny, or at least not rainy, we hopefully will be able to.
Speakers will keep it brief.
Yeah.
Always, always. Yeah. So we have that. Did you want to share a
Sure.
couple of the?
Right, the seniors have been quite busy. They wrapped up their capstone projects last week, and that took place under the leadership of our guidance counselors, Heidi Heider and Susan Lynch, along with many staff members who helped to participate in that event. The National Honor Society Senior Recognition and Book Night was held last week, as well as the Scholarship Night. And then this morning, they had an interesting mock accident that was held on the field for students. Tonight, they'll be signing yearbooks during the senior sunset and getting ready for senior academic awards on Wednesday morning, followed by mandatory graduation rehearsal Thursday at 9:30. Meanwhile, our 9th graders had their academic awards held this morning, and they're still plugging away with Science MCAS scheduled for tomorrow and Wednesday, so we won't forget about them, that they're still diligently working. And our 5th grade Adventure Days at East Boston Camp was held last Friday and today, and a huge thank you goes out to Jamie Holmes and a team of volunteers who made this year a nice success for the 5th graders.
It's a little bit more like an army of
Yes.
An
volunteers.
army, okay,
Yeah.
an army of
That's
volunteers
great.
helped
And
out.
it's a miracle we were able to see each other through the clouds of pollen.
Oh, jeez.
And I kept joking with the kids of the station I was at today. I can't lose my voice for later, so you got to listen to me the first time. But it's a lot of fun, and it's it's a lot of work. So I'm grateful that it gets organized.
Yeah, great. And many other things are happening throughout the district at the end of the year that takes a lot of work, whether it's the concerts, end of the year activities, field day. Miller School had over 50 parent volunteers helping out for their field day. And both the Nabnasset and Miller School is happy to report that their school gardens are growing, and they're pretty excited about that as well. So lots of fun things happening.
Great, thank you. School committee updates.
Oh, actually, I had the pleasure of attending the climate change exhibit at Stony Brook by the 8th graders. There were a huge variety of projects ranging from sculptures made from recycled materials, artwork, games that the kids had created involving ecological themes and climate change. A lot of the themes did seem to deal with plastics in the environment. And there's some really creative solutions as well for reusing things, but it was a pleasure. And I also wanted to give a shout out to all the high school volunteers at the Fun Fest, the Chrysopoli and Robinson Fun Fest that was held Friday night. There were over 40 of them, and all the parents were commenting on how wonderfully mature and sensitive they were, and what a great job they did. So,
Thanks, Lori.
yeah, you're welcome.
Any other updates?
Just to piggyback on the capstone exhibit, I walked around very briefly, but I was amazed at how many student teaching capstones there were. And I think that speaks volumes to the staff that we have and the experience that students have, that they want to go back and experience with their teachers, so.
My favorite of those is the like what I learned about myself or what surprised me. Like, you know, just some of us take years to realize that we're not good at multitasking, or, you know, but they've figured that out in their, you know, 8 weeks experience, so. Yeah. Any other updates?
I just wanted to comment on the 8th grade civic project as well. First of all, to thank the 8th grade social studies teachers at Stony Brook for inviting us in. I actually ended up spending pretty much the day there once I left Westford Academy. I was just so impressed with all of the students. It was just such a magic day. I think you couldn't have lined it up between starting at Westford Academy that morning and then going on to see all these 8th graders who are all now our rising 9th graders, and just the topics that excited them. And I actually think there might even be a few action items for school committee coming out of it, so just, yeah, watch this space.
You're reminding me, I think we've gotten a couple emails I gotta respond to. Great, any other school committee updates?
Yes. So about a week and a half ago, the school start time subcommittee met with Jen Piper, the transportation manager, as well as the company that we've partnered with, TransFinder, to look at efficiencies in our bus routes, to look at one of the main priorities, right, we talked about is looking at a later start time for our secondary schools. So we were presented with a bunch of scenarios that looked on both extending that secondary time a little further, about 8 o'clock. Also looking at potentially a single tier of K to 2 and 3 to 5 transportation routes. Obviously I think one of the big questions we're focused on is, after the override vote, is looking at efficiencies and looking at reducing costs. So we were able to get an initial report. We gave them some more data, especially ridership numbers, and kind of more calculated to this year. And we were able to get some more studies back, and I think there are some interesting results that we're going to be, hopefully in a couple weeks, presenting at least a more formative
There's
presentation.
definitely options we can kind of fine-tune, which is exciting.
Yeah,
I was
it
worried
is.
we would be cut off at the pass and the conversation would
Yeah,
die there,
yeah.
so,
So.
yeah.
I know you guys will probably have a meeting soon, or do you expect time on the agenda on the 17th, or that's too
Yeah.
soon, or?
I think we can get a presentation together, so.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
I don't think we're going to have a definitive
Yeah,
recommendation.
yeah, we
probably,
won't have a
but
definitive,
This has
but-
taken a little bit longer, I think, than we anticipated in terms of, because it took a couple of weeks to get all the data input into the system. But I think it would be good for everyone to kind of see where we're at.
Yep, great. Okay, any last school committee updates? Did I miss anybody? No. Okay, thanks. And we can skip student representatives. So we'll get started a little early for our first order of business, which is CPAC survey results. And we'll welcome up the CPAC board. Yes. Hi, feel free to introduce yourselves and dive right in. We'll pull it up on the
Yeah,
screen.
it's already up.
Thank you so much for having us. This is our second time being here this year. We were here last time in November for Massachusetts has annual CPAC Awareness Month was in November, and so at that time we talked a little bit about the CPAC, who we are and what we do. And this time we're here to go over our annual parent and caregiver survey of students with special needs. My name is Melissa Mackey. I'm the chair for the CPAC, and with me here is Lisa Studer, who is the vice chair, and then Danielle Thompson, who is the secretary treasurer.
Thank you.
So, thank you. So, what is a CPAC? Just briefly, ideally a CPAC is a parent-led and parent-driven group. The state of Massachusetts does require that every school district establish a PAC, and Massachusetts state law assigns us both an advisory and a participatory function to the CPAC. And so our duties shall include, for all of my lawyers in the room, advising the school committee on matters that pertain to the education and safety of students with disabilities, as well as meeting regularly with school officials to participate in the planning, development, and evaluation of our district special education program. And additionally, each year, the district, in collaboration with the CPAC, is required to host an annual workshop on the rights of students and their parents under state and federal special education laws. That's also called the Basic Rights Workshop, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. You're all ahead of me. Thank you. So under the law, CPACs are empowered to be self-governed, and we have established our own operational procedures and bylaws so that we remain parent-driven, parent-led, and parent-organized. So we have our own mission and the ways that we support that mission, but most importantly, we want to ground ourselves as an organization in being a resource for families. So the purpose of our survey. So Leslie is the program director for the Federation for Children with Special Needs, and she has said that if a CPAC is an engine, then parent input is our gasoline. And so as a CPAC, we are always looking for our parents' input, and a successful CPAC hinges on its ability to shape the input from our families into concrete issues and then direct that information to district decision makers with the goal of being positive changes in services, policies, and programs. You're doing great.
Am I in the wrong one?
You're fine.
Oh, okay.
You're
talking about Leslie there. I was like, where is she?
Yeah, I'm just not reading off the slides.
Okay.
Okay, next slide. Thank you.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is our fourth survey. We did conduct it through March and April, as you read on there. And there is a lot of science behind survey research. And I will just say up front that none of us are survey research experts. But surveys are great because they can give us hard numbers and they can help us identify trends over time. And a survey becomes more powerful when the same question is asked at different points in time. So we purposefully do ask or keep the majority of our questions the same so that we can get a clearer vantage point on how things are changing, helps us look at trends over time and identify unmet needs.
This is more survey results than you had last year, right?
Yes,
This is really,
absolutely.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
we do
no,
our
this is a-
survey at
this
the
is a
end
big
of the
cohort.
year.
Yeah.
In March, and we present our findings to first the CPAC membership, then to the Office of Special Education, and then here to the school committee. And this year we had 115 respondents, which was a 9.7% response rate in comparison to last year's 7.3. So we're happy to see that number increasing. And then, so the idea is we do this at the end of the year. We help create our goals to drive us for next year. And so here are some of our demographics. We invite all families with children on IEPs and 504 that live in Westford to complete the survey. So you will see some out of district, private school, a few from charter school and Neshoba Tech. But because many of our questions are specific to special education in Westford Public Schools, our survey does skip those families who do not respond as a Westford Public School student just for those questions and then comes back at the end for them. Thank you. So this is our distribution of our grade level of our number of respondents. We see a fairly reasonable distribution of all grades. Typically, we do see a higher response rate in our 3 through 5 and 6 through 8. Again, these are our respondents by IEP and 504. Our first year completing the survey, we did have a little smaller number of our 504. We see that has continued to rise, and you will see a section there that says neither. That is for respondents that are either waiting for their response or they have been denied. Okay, we move on to communication and support. Many of our questions will center around communication, this building block for a strong IEP team. And so we ask our families, when you think about how your child's special education team communicates with you about your child's progress, which statement most accurately describes how you feel? And so we see our ledger there on the side. The blue represents that the team over communicates, and we can see that has a fairly small number of respondents. 36.6 or about 37% say that the communication from the team is just right. About 33% that it's okay, but I feel like they could provide more updates. And then our green area there, about 27% say there's rarely or never communication from the team unless I ask for an update. And then that purple small mark right there is that there is rarely or never communication from the team even when I do ask for an update. And so we'll just move to the next slide. Since we have been doing this survey for the last 4 years, we now can start looking at the trends and start seeing what are we looking at over time. And so for this one, I'll just orient you a little bit more to the slide. So along the horizontal axis, we see our last 4 years of collecting data that we are looking at the entire respondents pre-K through 12. And then the vertical axis there is our percent respondents. So it's not going to be 100% because we didn't have 100% of people responding to the same answer. So it's just of your percent respondent. And so I draw your attention to the green line first. That's the communication from the school is just right. So if you look at the 23-24 data, that's the exact data we just saw on the last slide, but we're just now looking at it over the last 4 years. And so over the last 4 years, or since 21-22, we see that green line has steadily increased, that the communication from the school is just right. And then we also are noticing, if you're looking at that red line on the bottom, that stays fairly low, and that's because that is the one that there's rarely or never communication from the school even when I ask for an update. So the next slide, please. We are able to draw out some grade specifics. We are able to draw out through K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and then 9 through 12. And so we did pull out this one, the 6 through 8. They have a somewhat of a discrepancy in comparison to the overall, where you see that orange line, which represents there's never or rarely communication from the school unless I ask for an update, has risen slightly. That communication from the school is just right. It's coming down. And we even see the red line sort of slowly increasing as well. So this would be data for the CPAC to let us know to reach out to those middle school families, to coordinate maybe with our CPAC liaison in that school, collaborate with building staff and principals to address and take a look at those communication concerns. So our next question is about comfort voicing your concerns to the teacher and school staff. This one is on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being not comfortable at all and 5 being extremely comfortable. Through the Google form, we are not able to label the 2, 3, and 4, so respondents have to infer that the 3 is a neutral. And so here you see that many of our families, about 3/4, are comfortable voicing concerns regarding child's progress. Those are the people who responded either on the 4 or the 5. 15% would be in that neutral category, and then another 13% are on the side of either not at all comfortable or maybe the 2 is somewhat uncomfortable. So when we talk about barriers to communication, comfort level is always an important factor to consider, and there's lots of reasons why families could be uncomfortable, and it's something that we have to work more at delving into that. Next slide there. And then so now we're looking at that year over year. Remember, this is on the scale of 1 to 5, so 1 being not at all comfortable and 5 being completely comfortable. So for 23-24, we see those same numbers as we saw on the bar chart before, the 5s and 4, indicating that comfortable level at approximately 75%, and then the 1s and the 2s are down there at around 13% combined. Okay, and the next slide here, yes, this is us differentiating again some different grades. So we see in the grades 9 through 12, and we also saw in grades K through 2 a higher level of discomfort, being at 17% and 18% respectively. So this again helps us as a CPAC direct our attention and be more thoughtful in how we are supporting those families. We ask our families your comfort level when it comes to requesting additional support for your child. Again, this is on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being not at all comfortable, 5 being completely comfortable, and again, just focusing on requesting that additional support. And so here, the number of respondents that are not comfortable or on the not comfortable side are a little bit higher at 20%. And the next one, and then this is going to be the trend over time, and just a little bit higher on those 1s and 2s. And again, looking at the grades K through 2 here, showing at 30% in the discomfort, requesting additional support for your child. And so that leads us to the question, okay, if this comfort is maybe coming from maybe a lack of understanding of the special education process. So if you go to the next slide, we do ask that question. The last 2 years we've been asking families, when you think about your knowledge regarding the special education process, how comfortable do you feel advocating for your child? So about 66% here are on that 4 and 5 on the comfortable side, another 25% in the neutral, and then 11% saying I'm not really comfortable here. And so part of our mission as a CPAC is to help educate and inform our families so that they, and it supports them in their advocacy for their children, and we just hope that the district also has that same goal. All right. In 2024, 85% of our families know who their assistant principal or the student support leader is. And that is in comparison to last year, we were at 82%, so a little bit higher this year. Go to the next one. So then we can see this sort of like over time. And I think it was in the 21-22 school year where we did have that change with the student support leader becoming the assistant principal in our K through 5. So that sort of makes sense that that number was a little bit lower there because there's a lot more talk about it. So we can just ask ourselves, looking at this over time, what is our baseline? What do we want it to be at? Next slide. In 2024, 80% of our families know who their child's special education teacher is. That is slightly decreased from previous years at 83%. And here we saw an increase in K through 2, which they usually do know who their child's special education teacher is, at an 18%. And then the largest number is typically in that 9 through 12, and they were at 30%. That's our year-over-year trends. And then relationships is a very important aspect to a successful IEP team, and so we want to know how our parents are perceiving this relationship. And so we ask our question, how much do you agree with this statement? My child's special education team views me as a valuable contributor to the IEP process. And here we see 28% families saying, no, I do not agree with that statement, and another 50% in agreement. And so this is an opportunity for the district and the CPAC to look at ways that we can build these relationships, and that can be done by increasing transparency and also providing meaningful opportunities for our families to be engaged. Okay. And we'll move into CPAC support and interest. So the survey is also a way for the CPAC to best reflect on how we are serving our families and our community. So we ask our families on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being that the CPAC is an instrumental resource and 1 being not helpful at all. How helpful do you find the CPAC? We see 66% of our families see the CPAC as a beneficial resource. So we can use this data to help tailor how we meet the needs of our families.
Wait, what percentage did you say?
We're at 66% of families on that 4 and 5 as like a beneficial
Oh, you're combining the
resource. Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you go back.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so for this one, when I'm looking at this over the trends analysis, I am looking to see that we are trending in better numbers up as opposed to down. And then so we ask about that basic rights workshop. So every year, the district, in collaboration with the CPAC, is required to host within district a workshop on the rights of students and their families under state and federal laws in regard to special education. We use the Federation for Children with Special Needs to do this, and it's always on one of 3 topics: evaluation and eligibility, the IEP itself, or transition planning. And so we want to know if our families are aware of this, obviously, because we want our families aware that this opportunity is there for them. And typically here we always see typically it's that the lower grades have less knowledge of this basic rights workshop. Oh, yeah, so if we go back one more, I will say this, though, because if you could look at it from last year at 59%, we did significantly increase to 67%. It was one of our goals for this year to increase that awareness, so we can say we somewhat met that goal. Thank you. Appreciate that. And then we do ask our families, we host a lot of speaker opportunities and events for families, so we want to know what they're interested in learning about, and they have been very consistent for the last 3 years with executive functioning staying at the top.
You want me to go on?
So we'll move on to the open-ended questions. We ask our families 3 different open-ended questions for them to just give us their comments on, and the first question is, what is the area of greatest concern in your students' education? And so 70% of our respondents, approximately, across all grade levels, had their primary concern is whether or not their child is receiving appropriate support or making effective progress. And so we take their comments and we sort of try and put them into general categories. So within that, there was concerns that the program was not meeting their child's unique learning profile, that the IEP was not being followed, that there wasn't enough meaningful updates on their child's progress. Other concerns were around lack of executive functioning skills and support with that within the classroom, inclusion and access to grade level curriculum, and then mental health, proper supports, and how that impacts their child's access.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question? Is the open-ended questions, is that for all out-of-district and in-district?
Yes.
So it's the 115 number of
You know
responses?
what, I do have to check on that to confirm it. I'm not 100% certain.
It
I can
is.
get back to you on
We had
that.
82 responses overall.
82
K to
open-ended.
12. 82 responses overall
For that section.
For the open-ended.
For the
for the open-ended section.
Got it,
yeah.
okay, thank you. So some people may have been in district, but just didn't type in an open-ended
Right,
thought.
right.
Got it.
Correct.
That's called cleaning the data in my business, and it's really hard.
Yeah.
No, I don't know actually if that is. And so you're right, that could be some of the out-of-district people who were responding to it. And then we asked what should be a top priority for Westford Public Schools. Communication. There is a feeling that there's a lack of collaboration between school and home. More help for families navigating the special education process. A priority, they would like inclusion to be a focus for the district, a focus on inclusion and training staff on how to modify and differentiate curriculum for unique learners. And then within mental health and social emotional learning, more access to social opportunities and consistency of support. And then for those earlier grades, proper screening and early identification. And we ask feedback for the CPAC. Do you have any additional comments? And families are wanting to see the CPAC be more involved in the individual schools, increasing the methods or ways we communicate, for example, posting meeting minutes, and then creating and offering connections for families and giving more individualized supports. So our recommendations, in accordance with our duties to advise the school committee on education of students with disabilities and to also participate in that planning, developing, and evaluation of our special education program, we do make these recommendations to the district for your consideration based on the feedback that our families gave us. And so since a large number of families were concerned with what they perceive or see as a lack of support within the classroom or access to curriculum, we have a recommendation under professional development for the district to utilize an inclusion specialist to offer training and or give support to our teachers and staff. So an inclusion specialist supports the special education teacher, the classroom teacher, and also related service providers by monitoring and helping implement the student's IEP. They help the classroom teacher in designing modifications and strategies for the curriculum for those students with complex learning needs so that they can be taught alongside their classroom peers in the least restrictive environment. So it really is an implementation at the classroom level for the district's vision of equity. An inclusion specialist has been utilized successfully in other districts. For example, Lisa is a BCBA at a district who has an inclusion specialist, and it has had a significant positive impact on their school. Within this professional development recommendation, we also asked the district to consider the family needs that were brought up in regards to executive functioning, both supporting at home and at school. On recommendation 2, it's to continue to support and implement UDL. We understand that implementing UDL is a goal for our district and one that we greatly support as a CPAC. We see that the goals were included in many of the schools' individual school improvement plans, and so we just ask that that still remain a priority for the district, and additionally asked increase outreach to families on what UDL is, how it's being used in the classroom, and then how that actually supports not just special education students, but all students. Recommendation 3 is to increase opportunities for communication with families. There still is that feeling of lack of transparency and families asking and desiring more communication. So we have discussed this with Gerard, and these are all ideas we sort of came up with him or talked with him about. He does have some ways that he is looking at to provide more of that direct feedback to families. And then on that same line of transparency and increasing transparency, the next one is increasing communication and transparency to families regarding program descriptions. So we have some programs here in Westford. They are classrooms that serve unique learning profiles. A few of them, or what I know of, is the Language Literacy and Learning Strategies program at Crisafulli. There's a Pathway to Success program, I believe at Blanchard, a REACH program, and then an SEL and academic learning classroom at day school. I don't know very much about these programs other than their names and what I've heard from other people, because Westford Public School does not make this information readily available to families. And this is important. Why is this important? Because the IEP team has to sit down and they have to discuss the student's unique needs as a learner. And IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, says that students with disabilities are entitled to an education in the least restrictive environment that is appropriate for their needs. And so that means that to the most extent possible, students should be educated alongside their non-disabled peers. So when the team is sitting at this IEP meeting, they're considering a large range of factors, including their services, and then the classroom setting, and they're deciding on the most appropriate placement. And so without this information available, this team is unable to make this really important decision, or if it's only available to staff and it's not available to parents, then they are not being given the tools they need to be effective members of the IEP team. So having program descriptions available to families, making those available on the district website. This is already implemented in a variety of other school districts, including Reading, Carlisle, Concord, Bedford, Billerica, just a few. What this does is help create transparency. It allows for families and the district to work collaboratively together as much as possible. And then to ensure that the programs are remaining relevant, effective, and responsive, then they should be regularly updated in a sort of 2-year review process. This program review process ensures that we're utilizing evidence-based practices, that it's remaining fluid and flexible for the changing needs of students. There's consistency, and then it also makes it in line with DESE's tiered focus monitoring, which requires oversight of a program at least 1 year. And then so we have some recommendations for the CPAC, our annual recommendations. One, working towards increasing our membership and our CPAC volunteers. We are already coordinating with our school principals to have that representation at the information nights or back to school nights. That lets families know who we are and what we do. We are working at establishing those CPAC liaisons, and we hope to see our school principals help us a little bit more with that. We are planning for our future workshops for next year and hope to run another survey and present those results to you as well. And that's it. I know that was a lot of information. Thanks for listening.
While you take a sip of water.
My friends.
Great job. So much information. We
Yes.
really appreciate every survey that you bring to us. I'm just going to open it up for comments or questions.
Sean's there.
You go.
Thanks for being here, guys. Jam-packed presentation, right? A lot of information there. I'm just curious. So this is the first time that I've ever heard of an inclusion specialist. I'm just curious if you guys put any thought into it. Obviously, this is not a year where doing a lot of hiring and expansions, but if you could elaborate on it, thoughts of it, like what it would look like, right? Are we talking a district-wide position as opposed to a building level, or what?
Well, I think, pie in the sky, it would be like a full-time position, but obviously that's not, and I mean, I think the cards, and so we offered, there's options under professional development to like train the staff, or they could be like a contracted service for an extended period of time. It just isn't a one and done type thing. We have talked with Gerard Coughlin about this, and he has come up with his own thoughts of how to support this need, and his ideas around the co-teaching method. And so he believes the co-teaching method is also going to meet this needs of the inclusion that we're looking for as well. And so that's something that we can further talk about, or within yourselves as the district and as the CPAC as well.
And if
I
it was,
would, oh, I'm sorry.
oh, sorry.
Nope.
I was going to say, if there was something you wanted to dive into more, we have kind of vetted out a few individuals who have organizations who run specific district-wide professional development under inclusion specialists. So they have, suites of packages depending on whatever the district is looking to focus on under the niche of inclusion. So we have talked to Gerard, and I think a couple of the organizations that we looked into overlap to some that he was looking into as well. So we just wanted to open that conversation, and happy to have more detailed conversations if it's something that you're willing to consider.
And obviously, I know it's not for this year necessarily, but just Reading, this is their first year of having a full-time inclusion specialist. Reading focused on just the elementary level, so we have 5 elementary schools in Reading, so that's where she primarily is. She's very, very busy, and it's made a world of difference for so many students. I don't have the numbers or the percentages by any means. I can get them, but it's made a world of difference in Reading.
Could you just speak a little bit to what she actually does specifically?
Yep, she goes into class. Well, you have to fill out a form and all that stuff, and then she will go in and consult with the teachers, the paraprofessionals, just whoever the school team is for the students. She'll go in, observe the student, work with the student, come up with different strategies, train the teachers and whatever other staff specialists that work with the student, so that the first question in the teacher's mind is, he or she can't be in my class, they need more support, they need to be out learning somewhere else in a different room. The inclusion specialist says, actually no, if we can do this, this, and this, they can actually be there next to their same, their peers and whatnot, and they can actually learn the same exact thing. We just might have to, add a few strategies in to make that, accessible for them. And it's been great. I mean, she's been in the district for a long time as a special ed teacher, so she knows a lot of people within the district, so she was a little bit nervous going in to be like, I'm going to be working with teachers that have been here for years, and I'm going to tell them to change their teaching style or whatnot. And she has gotten so much great feedback. She's she literally is booked up through, we end on the 14th, and she's booked up through noon on the 14th or something, with consults and whatnot. She goes to SST meetings for the kids that are going through that process initially. She's been able to keep a lot of students, not keep students from qualifying, but really showing actually they're not really at that point where they qualify for even a 504, let alone an IEP. This is what we need to do. That's part of our DCAP within Reading. So it's been just a huge
Impact, positive
impact in Reading.
And so I think that would be at that highest level, having one as a full-time employee.
Can I just pause? Because I want to say something that's going to be helpful to you, and you keep undermining what I'm going to say, so I'm just going to plow in. I don't know that this is not the year to do this, because I think there could be a significant cost savings. So if you're talking about parents who are unhappy with their child, the way their child's being included in the classroom, what ends up happening is that parents will ask for independent evaluations, which cost the district money. There are thousands of dollars every year that are spent on independent evaluations. It could help us keep more kids in district, and the more kids that we keep in the in-district classrooms, it frees up spots in those other sub-separate classrooms or in community-based and other schools that are day schools or what have you. So I think that there's a real financial argument to be made that this is exactly the year to do this kind of thing, and that there should be some examination of the dollars, because we're talking already about having an in-district placement to save money on our transition-aged youth, and this might be something that will help our younger kids stay in the classroom and it will actually ultimately save money.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
that. Really
I was
appreciate
trying.
that.
Thank you.
Even if it was a contracted service to pilot, right? Not invest in a full-time employee with benefits and all that, but, you know,
It could
it
be
might
something that
start as
ultimately-
professional
Yeah.
development.
Like I
and-
could see one model where if you started with contracted services, you're trying to build that capacity within the district, and hopefully you're swinging the scales to more of that embedded support within your staff. Talking about UDL and that professional development that's ongoing, minimizing the cost, but also minimizing the students that are getting referred.
Right.
It's a win-win for everybody.
Exactly.
And it also has that potential of keeping students with their cohort as opposed to shifting them to the individual programs.
So I think ultimately there could be, not just in terms of school placements, but also in terms of staffing and evaluations, because evaluation costs are a big part. I'm gonna defer, obviously, to Courtney, but I think evaluations are a significant portion of the budget at times. Even the first one's in, the second one's often.
Expensive, for sure.
And time, too. So you mentioned one of the concerns of parents is progress reporting, right? So, you know, I think there's that rule about as many progress reports as there are opportunities to report on progress. So marking periods could be quarterly, could be trimesterly, but also I'm guessing there's probably more of a continual progress, maybe on a daily basis, weekly basis, depending on the intensity of the student. Is that, any of the parents talk about that, any of the qualitative responses, what they might be seeking more?
Yeah, I think really what the families, it's that meaningful progress notes of, sometimes it can feel as though those progress notes are written very vague and for a lot of different students. And sometimes I think special education families are concerned very much about like that day-to-day things, because little small day-to-day things become very big problems later on, and when they're not being like brought up in a timely manner, it can make it much harder to address the concerns down the road. So for our families, we always are having that, like they want better communication, and we are continually diving into like what exactly are they looking for.
We spoke about that as a board too, kind of next year diving a little bit deeper into what that means to the families, like what kind of communication and progress reporting would be most meaningful to them. So that's something that we've kind of talked about diving into with more detail.
Great.
With the change in the IEP, actually, does the progress notes, is that shifting as well? I haven't looked into it. I'm just curious if anyone knows.
I don't think it
Not
is.
that I
right?
heard of.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So how those progress notes are reported out looks like it's kind of staying the same. Okay.
Well, I think it's more like the quality versus the quantity, right? And I think that it seems sometimes like the responses are like sort of generic responses on the progress reports.
I think the key is hanging on data, is what the parents typically are looking for, and is what the charge is in terms of the IEP. So it's not just that, oh, they're doing great, but what does that mean
kind
towards
of-
achieving the goal and objective? So that's the part that we're always trying to improve on.
I'd be interested to know on a building level, and not necessarily calling anyone out, but is there one building that is really, you know, they're hitting that sweet spot of communication, and, you know, another building is really the one that's falling behind? And if that's the case, having that communication with coordinators of, okay, we need to take what the people in building A know and they're doing, and really kind of retrain and help building B? Or is it an individual parent is looking for something different, in a different way of communicating than our educators are currently doing? And I think having that feedback from parents into the staff of, we would like something different, I think that would be good too, because we can't change what we don't know. Right.
Several years ago, when we first jumped into the new model at the elementary level, we did a leadership seminar to really bring our 6 new administrators together, whether they were previously assistant principals or student support leaders. We were just trying to provide, you know, a variety of different opportunities, professional development opportunities to embrace special education, and the other piece of AP work. And part of that included inviting members of the CPAC to speak from the parent perspective. And so we are, as you know, in a unique position again this year where we will be welcoming three new assistant principals at the K-2 level. And although we're only bringing in 2 people, we will be opening up that opportunity to any principal or assistant principal who might want to come in for different module training over the summer. That's really focusing on AP work and special education. And so we will be sure to invite you back so that you can maybe share the highlights of the survey that are most important and really kind of hit that communication piece of, if a parent doesn't feel heard or if the progress notes aren't robust enough to really give them the data that they need to hear about their students' support, then hopefully that can be communicated at that time.
And Courtney, speaking to that unique moment we're in right now with those new APs, any potential for a mentor-mentee sort of setup in that, just to glean off of the experience and knowledge that's in the district?
We do match everybody up with mentor and mentees, and so we'll do the same thing, going into the new year as well.
Can I ask some questions about the mental health pieces of this? I understand that when you all clean the data, you put it into these different categories. Can you share some of the comments around social opportunities? Is that talking about kids' level of anxiety and like having opportunities for them to be together, or is that more like having more opportunities for social emotional learning? Like, what is social opportunities is kind of a broad term to me. I was kind of wondering like if there's something in particular that families are looking for.
You'll see a lot of older kids, so your high schoolers, not having the same opportunities as their peers to engage socially because they need more support. So they can't go to just any social opportunity and be able to engage. And so we've had parents come to the meetings and talk specifically about that. Unified sports is a wonderful opportunity. We're so glad to see that came on this year. But it's about having that kind of access and ensuring as well that even if you just say, oh, we're having this dance and everybody's included, everybody can come, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually inclusive, because not everybody can actually go to that. And it doesn't have to mean even physical, it's just the nature of what's happening there.
Yeah.
And so it's about, I think, for specifically you said social opportunities, it's just sort of broadening our understanding of what that means when you're talking about kids with disabilities, I think.
Some of those social opportunities, this might be an opportunity to connect with the PTOs. I know this is something CPAC has spoken about anyway, but
would love to
the
if there's like so
PTOs
many more of us.
are the ones who do a lot of those dances and stuff at the school outside of the formal prom and stuff. So that might be an avenue to connect to last year or for next year.
And then for mental health, I'm sorry, I just want to come back to that one. As I'm recalling some of them, it's the concern around the mental health that the support they're giving isn't staying consistent. That is kind of just like a little check-in and then off, and that their child's mental health is impacting their access to the education, and they're not getting the support to help them through that. So those are some of the comments.
Have we hit everybody? Has everyone had a chance to?
I just wanted to make a general comment. This highlighted difficulty finding information on the website. I know websites are really difficult to construct in a way that's easy to navigate for everyone. It's part of my work. But this isn't the first group that has highlighted that. I know a full redesign is not in the cards anytime soon, but I think there are steps that we can probably take to increase accessibility to information on the website, and I would certainly welcome some feedback, and I'll look at it as well of how we might restructure some things that, again, if the special education is identified as something that's hard to find, then getting some unity across all the schools' individual sites of how to get to that information may be may be a priority to take on as a small tweak, not a full redesign, but just some menu structure changes.
Yeah. And that jumped out at me too, because I remember that as part of when Gerard came in April, I think. So it sounds like that build out and descriptions and public facing information was on his radar as well. Yeah. And the other thing, go ahead.
I was just going to say also on the topic, the town are currently also looking at doing, it's what's called a transition plan, and looking at even just accessibility of our programs and online website, or our town website and stuff. So there will be definitely updates and suggestions coming once that's completed as well.
The only other thought I had that jumped out at me from the recommendations that is like sort of low-hanging fruit, I think, for school committee is the UDL updates. You know, we sit and make an agenda every 2 weeks, so I think that's something very tangible and low-hanging fruit for us to be able to say, okay, when does that make sense based on professional development, based on our SDIPs and our goals that are happening, to bring that here and then be sharing that outwards to families. So I really appreciate all of the work that went into this, all of the recommendations, the tangible examples, the data backed. It's all really powerful. So
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. And yeah, on behalf of the board and our whole community, I just want to extra thank you to all the school committee members, especially Sean for being our liaison, and Catherine and Val for showing up to our meetings this year. Dr. Tu, thank you for taking your roadshow to our meetings and also coming to answer lots of questions. We appreciate you and your collaboration. And I know Gerard's not here, but he's been a wonderful collaborator this year. We've had many meetings with him, and he's attended a lot of our meetings as well. So we look forward to continuing our collaboration.
I think if you all have information about any of the costs that are associated with an inclusion specialist, and I think if you have any information with regard to any of the cost savings that districts have experienced, I would invite you to share that with us.
We will do that. Great.
I assume you're going to be back with us in November anyway as well. So.
Hopefully we'll get that to you before then.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you,
much.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
our next order of business tonight is field trip approvals for 2024-2025. And we invite Mr. Ware from Westford Academy up to the microphone. So everybody should have seen, there's actually a revised version in your packet of a list of all of the field trips, and take it away.
Okay, thank you. Just to share our practices is that early spring, I send out a notification to our staff that if you are traveling out of state or overnight, all those trips usually come to school committee for approval. The ones that are repeaters are sometimes slam dunks, and there's always ones that are new that I have to, or one of us have to propose to the committee. I do have 5 that I just want to speak about tonight that should be highlighted coming off this year, and I just think I want to bring some attention to next year. We have 4 in April vacation, and then we have 1 in February vacation. The February vacation trip is a newly proposed trip to Cambodia by Mr. Brandon Ang. Mr. Brandon Ang has a very solid background in Cambodia. He tells a phenomenal story, and we've been asking him to do this trip, and he's been putting it off, and he's finally taken the risk and put together a nice package. So that is one of the trips that we do need your approval on. The 4 that are going in April vacation, there's a music festival down in Orlando. It's a nationwide music festival that's by Karen St. George and Adam Shackleton, which is a repeater, but it hasn't gone in a while. I just want to have that on your table tonight. Then we have a new proposed trip to Costa Rica, which is our Spanish club, which is Mrs. Devlin and Miss Benactar. And then we have 2 internationals that have gone before. One is Spain, and the other one is France. So really, the 2 proposed ones that we're asking for permission is the Cambodia and the Costa Rica. The other 3 have been repeaters, but I just want to share those highlighted ones because, you know, we have 40 plus, but most of them are just one hitters.
Yeah.
You know, the outing club, the the Cirrus Club, there's just a turnaround back in one day. These are the extended ones that I just want to answer any questions on tonight.
I'm just realizing, I think you didn't mention the Mandarin trip.
Yeah, we're gonna.
We don't know, right? We
Yeah,
don't know where that is.
We're gonna
right?
put that on hold.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
on-
going
That's
on
on your
hold?
list, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
unfortunately, our
Staff member.
teacher's moving, so.
Okay.
So we just haven't hired it, so we'll, yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. We're in the interview process now, but we don't want to ask a new candidate to take that on.
The qualifying question.
September 1st.
About travel.
Yeah. Yeah.
A car passport.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to clarify too that technically out of state there and back are not school committee approval. So if you look at our policy P5404, it's overnight and foreign countries that come to us for approval. But in reflecting on sort of the larger conversation, I think it's helpful to see the breadth of opportunities that are available to our students, because based on our conversations in the fall with the 8th grade class trip, I think it's worth reiterating to families, to students who were disappointed by that decision, that there are chances and opportunities to travel with your classmates when you get to high school. I also want to point out that there is no class trip for 8th grade for next spring on this list. I don't want to shy away from calling that out directly to our families that may have been waiting for the spring to circle back on that. Some conversations we've had, just, the challenges that exist for a trip of that scale for multi-nights away have not changed since our conversations in October. And I think that, Catherine and I sat down with our middle school principals as well as Dr. Chu. I think I'm hopeful that at some point there is a balance, or because we do have a role of representing families, and we heard pretty strongly from a bunch of families in the fall about the loss of that trip. So it's not, I just want to directly admit that it's not on this year's for next year's 8th graders, and that we will just continue to.
I think the takeaway of that conversation was just, this is an opportunity to kind of reimagine what, kind of those trips in middle school look like. And so it's not that we're saying, trips can't happen, but obviously this is just an opportunity, and things change, and I don't doubt there's new and other opportunities and exciting field trips.
And in that
Yeah.
vein, similar
Yeah.
to what Mr. Ware had just shared too, is this isn't all the trips, this isn't all the field trips that are taking place at
Yeah.
WA. This is only the ones that they had identified that they thought would come here. And yes, we had talked about that earlier, about whether
Yeah.
out of state actually, we have this, there's a series of things.
Yeah.
There's one trip that just the building principal can decide on,
Yeah.
and then they go to a next level if it's out of state, and then you're right, whether it's overnight and or out of the country. But there's also field trips that take place in all of our schools,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So all of the grades, the middle school grades, like you're using the word trips, but they are still,
Field
they are
trips.
still having field trips and events this year. They will next year.
Right.
And that's not necessarily going to change.
Right.
We're just bringing the group of trips that need your approval, and some extras that don't need your approval.
Right.
The nice thing is though that any of those trips we're seeing all have that educational
Yep.
benefit, which is in line with the policy that
Yep.
that we have.
Which I was just
Yeah.
going to point back to, because I think it's also helpful in part of our fall conversations that we reflected on the policy to refine what does come to us, but the other part of that is reading the policy. It's not the school committee's purview to direct a school building to do something either. So it is, our role to approve. And I think, as you can see, most of them are driven by staff interest,
Yeah.
right? So,
There was, would you mind also, I know you had asked, a lot of people have asked questions because of the Italy trip
Yeah.
about the companies that we work with.
Sure.
So can you talk, I mean, you were also proactive in trying to solicit information there too. Could you
Yeah.
share with the full company with the full
Yeah,
committee some of that?
Italy brought some challenges. And when you come back, excuse me, I have the pollen issue. You have to look into what went well and what didn't go well, and whereas we as a school can improve upon. And bed bugs are, it's not, I didn't think it had anything to do with EF tours. But what I did learn throughout this process, that the support that EF tours gave us was exceptional. And they have no hesitations about going back with EF tours. And they're globally located, they're globally recognized, and they're 24/7 access to any type of support that I've learned in meeting with these people and who they are going to use for a tour company. There was no hesitation about going back with that company. And then 2 of these are going with a company called Forum, and only because they've had great success with them prior to. So I didn't really see any hesitation on either one of them, and I didn't get any complaints about either company.
Okay. Can I just actually note on that though as well? I mean, we talk about the benefit of these trips as well, learning to go away. Any of us know as a traveller, you can often have flight delays. If you were following a lot of European news anyway last summer or this year, you would have known bed bugs as kind of a big issue. It was on the London subway and stuff. So I know these problems arise, but I think it's also a good opportunity for, students to see we figure it out, we solve it, and we overcome it. It's so as long as you have, a full
E
trust in EF moving forward and bringing the students away, that's awesome.
100%. Yep,
Can I just ask a quick question about the Cambodia trip?
sure.
The team is the students in good academic standing. So is that theoretically open? It's 30 students out of 1,600 approximately?
Yep.
Okay, so that could be a very competitive
Diverse group.
process.
Yep.
I've come to learn that academic standing is sometimes out of control of the student, right? So I would be interested myself learning a little bit more of the selection process on that. I know a lot of the other trips are same thing. My son participated in the German exchange program, which is also of a select group.
Yeah.
I do trust that the teachers need to have a comfort level with who they're bringing with them as well. But I would hope that there's some accommodations.
Yeah,
for
it's a
that
great
term.
point, because good academic standing doesn't really, we don't deny kids if their GPA is low.
Right.
It's really about their citizenship in our building is what's more important than their academic standing.
Bob, I had a question about the Costa Rica trip. So looking at the other foreign trips, 25 up to 30, Costa Rica's proposing up to 50. Is that, are we sure that advisors and volunteers can cover that many students?
Yeah, if there was one, I don't want to say regret, but I will. I thought, the Greece trip 2 years ago was a huge success. And then we came around and we proposed the Italy, and that sold out in a day. And they didn't want to deny kids.
Yeah.
And we opened it up to another bus, if you will, of 50 and 50. And, looking then back, I don't know if that was the right number to take.
Okay. So this has been thought.
I think 50 is our max,
Yep.
and it just comes down to transportation on the ground.
Sure.
And cost efficiency on that. And manageability, if you will, too,
I really appreciate the commentary.
Yeah.
So we will take a vote on, I would propose just the whole list, even though there's the new ones were what you highlighted, but we're approving the overnight and foreign trips for the school year 2024-2025.
Are we going to include that China trip that may or may not happen?
I'm going to take that off the table.
Yeah,
Completely.
okay.
Yeah,
So
so
as
excluding-
amended,
Excluding.
removing the Mandarin trip to China.
Yeah.
So moved.
Seconded.
I'm sorry, I lost my notes. Catherine, Bill, okay, any final comments, questions? Take pictures, send.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for
Actually-
the Ireland trip to come up on this, and then I'll totally chaperone with you.
I would say it would be interesting to get reports back from some of these foreign trips.
Well,
of
so I
student
think
experience.
that's part of what we've been learning and sort of learning on the fly is so important, is this reflection step added in, because I think that was one of our learnings from DC, was that had we spent a little bit more time maybe in retrospective.
But I'd be interested in some of the student, experience as well, being even formally presented as
Sure.
as an agenda item, so that we can show the public what's going on.
A slideshow.
All right, all in favor? Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. West. We are moving on to the policy update of policy P3401, starting with the first reading. So I will make a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Seconded.
And a second. Thank you. All those in favor of waiving the full reading of the 9-page policy? Great. That's 6-0. Okay. The policy subcommittee want to walk us through this?
Yep, so I know we're kind of coming a little bit later in the school year with another policy, but this was one that, it was a chunky one, and it took many hours, and we just really wanted to keep going with it while it was still fresh. The review of this came about following an audit that Director of Finance Jenny Lynn brought to us, and by an outside company, I suppose is the right term, and part of that audit included reviewing our financial policies, and this was the one policy that they flagged in particular, and had a number of suggestions for us, comments to consider. I will say this is probably one of the policies we've had quite a lot of input in between Jenny, Dr. Chu, the policy committee, Valerie as finance subcommittee. So I think we've had a lot of really meaningful and detailed discussion on pretty much every line and word that exists in this policy. So what we're getting tonight is kind of the combination of that process. And so I don't know if any of you have any questions. I know, Tom, you sent some questions through earlier. I hope that kind of gave you a bit more clarity. But if there's any questions, the process this is going to look like for the next few weeks is that we would open public comment tomorrow, June 4th, and that would close June 20th. I know our last meeting is scheduled for June 17th. And so between this meeting and our following meeting, any school committee or further leadership feedback is welcome. And we will take that public comment and have one final policy meeting before we break, so that we have a finalised version ready to approve on our first official meeting back. So with that, I know it's a chunky one. There's lots of edits and changes and tweaks. I will say as well on the, just a note, we work through Google Docs, and when different people are changing different wording, it gives you a different colour. So some of the changes you see are actually in green as opposed to kind of the pink. It just depends on who made the change. So there's no way we can fix that. I've checked. So there's no other reason behind the different colouring. So,
and I'll just add that the finance subcommittee had undertaken a review last spring of these accounts, and it was sort of an unwieldy at the time amount of information. So I think I just wanted to connect it to the next business item, which is a review of the accounts, because the idea being that as we do go through this policy, that we want to make this review more routine and practical and practiced, I guess would be the other word. And the only other thought I had was, I know you were saying open to leadership feedback for the next 2 weeks. I guess because these are this is a policy that's like on the ground affecting like tasks that people do. I guess I would just ask to make sure that the administrative assistants in the buildings have a chance to look at, and then maybe even like some of our major club advisors could really like take a review or be prompted to think it through what this means for their
Yeah.
practices.
I think by reaching out specifically to the principals, they're going to know who are the people in the building
Yeah.
to
They'll get
flag it.
feedback from.
Okay.
So maybe
But
if
maybe
we
just
can reach out.
Specifically put in there,
We
you
could.
want them.
I will say that one of the reasons why we're doing this and we're looking at this, it is to refine our practices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we are apt to hear some people say that this is not
What
the
we
way
do.
that they've done things and
Yeah.
this, or the way that they want to do it moving forward. So, but we are taking this on guidance from
audit,
the
yeah.
audit. So I
Alright.
feel like we need to.
That's fair. Yep.
We need to remember
We have
why
to-
this,
yeah.
why this came about in the first place.
Yeah, it's all best practice and
Yeah.
what the auditor is.
But yes, I think
yeah.
we'll continue to get
Yeah.
the feedback.
And I suppose just to note, the main kind of additions in was kind of putting a bit more information regarding receipts, travel and kind of field trips, and the introduction of the debit card for use. Those were the main kind of points that were added in. The other thing to note is that this being 7 pages also comes along with, how many pages is in the guidelines? 60.
Guidelines for the debit card.
No, not just for the debit card. It's, I'll give you the correct, it's the Westford Public Schools Student Activity Accounts Guidelines and Procedures, which governs the use of student activity accounts. Jenny's, so, I mean, essentially that guideline, is in line with our policy, and Jenny's already been reading through it, and we've updated already changes within that to do with the debit card, and any other changes from the policy will.
Okay, so
Can I
that's
just-
more of operating
Yeah.
within the policy.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, just to be clear.
I'm hoping that people will read this policy. Anyone who might be listening to the conversation right now that we've used the word debit card like 3 times, I would like to clarify. That one of the things that we know is that there has been a longer practice of people needing to use their personal credit cards and then getting reimbursed for things, which is what we're trying to avoid.
Okay.
And we did look at how, with the number of international trips that we have, we had seen that there had been practices of people either needing to bring cash and or again putting things on personal credit cards, which we know is not the best practice. And so we investigated how might we be able to support something like an international trip where one person could have authorization to have access to a card that could be connected to the student activity account that's holding the money for the trip. So it's not that we have a
Yeah.
debit card that anyone can use,
Exactly.
or that it would be used frequently.
Yeah.
But that we're trying to establish truly a best practice in how we can support the adults who are, taking somebody primarily out of the country is really what the main cause or need is. But then additionally, just the idea of, we have a lot of staff members who have needed to get something and would put that on their personal card, and we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
So that there are other ways that they can order what they need without needing to worry about getting reimbursed.
There are a lot of companies that they only do business by online
That's right.
credit card
Yeah, we have-
purchase
we
at
have-
this
we have
point. No,
experienced
no
that.
invoice, no check, that's it, so. Or you have to pay 4 times as much to get the same thing from someone that will invoice you, so.
So, the committee is encouraged to read the draft between now and the 17th, and send any feedback to Catherine as policy chair.
Unofficially.
Oh,
at the
sure.
moment. That was Chris.
And it will be open for public comment. Anything else I'm missing as a reminder?
No, it'll open for public comment tomorrow, June 4th, and it will close June 20th, which is the 12 business days that our policy suggests. So it's actually an extra day because we have Juneteenth
yep.
in there, so.
And can you remind how public comment is provided?
So you can access it through our school committee website or webpage, the
Right-hand bar.
the right-hand bar, left-hand bar, and there's a Google form. So the policy will go up, you'll see it live for public comment. You can read it, click onto the link and read it there, and then there's a Google form that you can then fill out and submit. And that all populates in a wonderful thing called Airtable.
Okay, great, thank you. And then it would need a final reading.
And vote.
In August.
In our
presumably
August,
at our
yeah,
next- Okay.
yeah.
Great, thank you. Next up is the student activity account review with the memo in our packet. Jenny's gonna, Director of School Finance, Jenny Lynn, at the microphone to explain to us the 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm seeing 4 recommendations.
Do you want that memo up or anything, Jenny?
Yes.
Oh, you do, okay.
Yes, I do. Thank you for having me. And according to school committee's newly drafted policy, so schools' financial assistants have provided us with a summary of all student activity account balances, including each class grade level and the school system-wide account balances. I have compiled those information into one summary memo for school committee to review. So first, I would like to give you a review by individual school. So in some schools, you may notice there's an inactive account or deficit accounts, which needs either closure or some remedial actions. So schools have made their suggestions and they are seeking for the approval from school committee. So I'm planning to go through those requests by individual school. So Catherine, if you can scroll down from the first school, which is Abbott.
Oh, it's also sideways in the PDF, so.
You got a rotate button.
Huh?
You got a rotate button there on the side.
This.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, got it.
Yeah, for Abbott School, you see some red highlights. These red highlights, those are the accounts with either positive balance or negative balances, and these accounts have not been used for several years. Actually, they're already inactive. So their suggestions is to close out those accounts into the school system-wide accounts. If you see all the red highlights for those clubs or activity accounts, they are Recorder, Nature's Vision, Conference Daycare, Compassion, 5th grade teachers, and Student Council. Those combined balance is 1,136. So they're asking if they can close out this total 1,000 balance into the school system-wide account. The other one is the pink highlight for students in need. So that account has $500 balance. The purpose for this account is for students in need for field trip and 5th grade adventure day. So they're asking because that account is like serves as the same purpose as PTO scholarship. So they're asking if they can combine this account with the PTO scholarship.
Makes sense.
The next one.
Oh, can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
Who was making the decision about student in needs? Because I'm assuming that the PTO was making the decision about who qualifies for.
It's the principal.
That could be principal,
Yeah.
not PTO.
Yeah, so it's,
PTO fund it, but typically, I think the principal would be the.
I guess I'm like, who's the decision maker and are you taking the decision away from them? But sorry, Jenny, keep going.
Yeah, probably students need to apply for those,
Or
reduce or.
Parents might be reaching out to the
Yeah,
principals.
parents or students, they can reach out to the school principal or their classroom teacher Usually, I
they-
think it's a school principal.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen a number of times.
That would be protected
Exactly,
information that they
protected
wouldn't
information.
provide to
Right,
any
it's
parent.
confidential, it's a confidential scholarship.
I think to your question, though, is if the PTO has the, if they have the governance of that account, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
kind of the question is why.
So they're
I'm-
funding
I'm-
it.
I'm curious as to why they would want to combine the accounts, but you're
they're
right.
both-
Ultimately, Mr. Meyerson is responsible for all of the
Yeah.
student activity
Yeah, it's just more
accounts.
like, was it like a different determination or like?
Well, actually, now that I say this, saying that is not a PTO account.
No.
Because the PTO has their own accounts separate.
yeah.
So that's what it's, so that's a PTO, that's something that the PTO has donated to the school, and that must be scholarship that the PTO as a has contributed
Yeah.
to. But these are the student activity accounts, so it would still all be Mr. Meyerson.
Yeah.
Because PTO accounts and student activity account, they are supposed to be separate. So if there's a PTO scholarships, they are donating the money for their student activity. So the principal has the final decision to decide, like, which student they would like to offer the assistance.
One of the challenges with the student activity accounts, as you go through all of the pages, you will
Yes.
see, is the naming,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, so that
the
may be
naming
a-
system and how they name things, and sometimes
Yes,
you're like,
and-
it's not necessarily
That may be
consistent.
something we talk about separately.
I think that's a great point to remind everybody that this is like 9 pages of
Yes.
like dozens and dozens of counts, and that's not even counting WA, right? And so we're trying to get towards best practice.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna be a smooth ramp, right? So I think,
And these have, and we have gone through the auditing process appropriately for a number of years, and what Jenny is doing is trying to move us forward, right?
Right.
To say, okay, now let's take a lot, there have been, you know, in looking at the findings and the suggestions, is trying to say, okay, what consistent practices can we build moving forward?
It's kind of remarkable that the school store is 0, because just this week I was talking about my daughter's extensive eraser collection that she acquired over the years, so it's kind of.
Would that come from, though, because the PTO run like the little school store once a month?
I'm just
What is this
joking
from?
about
Oh,
it.
right,
Oh, yeah.
from like
Maybe she bought them
apparel.
all.
Like the
That's
apparel
right.
stuff.
Chris
There's
is
no
really-
inventory.
would be the Chris Woolley budget.
At
Jenny,
this point
just-
in the year, it could be
Jen-
that there's no school store anymore. That's
Jenny, just a
probably-
quick process question. For each school that you have like these suggested actions, do you want to, are they rolled up in the memo, or do you want us to act per school? Like, I don't wanna lose sight of them.
I think you can add after we review all schools, so we don't have to get approval or
Sure.
vote for individual schools.
So are
Some of
they,
those schools, they have, you know, a couple requests, but other schools, they don't have any requests at all.
Yeah.
Can I ask also one other question, just as we start this? In one or two of the
okay.
schools,
That's number 4.
you've highlighted that the library book fair account should be classified as a revolving account,
Right.
as
We did
opposed
that.
to a student
Activity
account. So whereas if you look at Abbott, we still have a library book fair account there that they're not suggesting be closed and changed to a revolving account. And I kind of felt it popped up in 1 or 2 other places. So I don't know, Jenny, if it's something that you can speak to, or maybe that needs a bit of conversation, because I think it would be strange for us to vote and close on some accounts, but other schools have them figuring out whatever best practice
Right.
is, so.
So actually, everything highlighted here is not my highlight.
Yeah.
Actually, those are the school's request.
Yeah.
So I get those requests directly from each school.
Mm-hmm.
They might have different requests. Like for library book fair, we do see a couple schools have the same account.
Mm-hmm.
But some of those schools, they request to close out to school system-wide account. The other school might just want to keep using the account for the library. So I didn't change anything for their request, because I know we probably want to keep that consistent, but every school they do have the authority to decide what kind of purpose they want to use those inactive student activity account. The principal has the final decision. Not the final decision, they can make a final suggestion how to handle those inactive accounts. But still, you know, that's supposed to be approved by the school committee. So I don't know, how do you want to handle that? Do we want to handle that in a consistent way, or we just listen to the school's suggestion or recommendation? So that's why I just keep their original request here. I'm not making any kind of changes myself.
I think consistency would be good, but whether or not we make that decision tonight is a different story.
Yeah. Well, I guess the one that, to pull that thread a little bit more, on the Miller School summary, it says library book fair. This account should be classified as revolving accounts based on an audit finding from many years ago. So if Miller, if that applies to Miller, then I guess
It
to
applies
follow
to
that
Abbott.
thread, like,
It should apply to all of them.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that was,
Okay. Why don't we keep stepping through, and then when we get to the, because what I was asking originally was, are the suggested actions captured in the 4 recommendations that you put in the high-level memo? And I answered myself, which was the number 4 says, the accounts for as recommended by each school are recommended for closure. So if we flag more of those concerns, that's where we could hold a vote.
Yeah.
Hold off on a vote for number 4.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So going on to,
So next one is Miller School.
okay, bear with me, because I don't know where we're going to be now.
Oh,
you have
right,
to
just
rotate.
rotate back.
Next page and then.
There we go.
Oh,
Yeah,
they rotate the one page,
everything's
that's
good.
good. That's good.
Oh. There we go.
So for Miller School, there's a field day account which is inactive because that deficit account was the supplies they purchased in fiscal year 22. That account doesn't have any activity since fiscal year 22. So they're asking that negative balance can be moved into the system-wide student activity account. For the library book fair, we already talked about that because now currently on the library book fair and conference care money, they all come to the central office and being deposited into our revolving account.
Right.
So these balances, they were generated from many years ago. So those account balance has been inactive for many years. So Miller is asking if they can keep this account just for library use. So they didn't ask for close out this account to the school system-wide activity account. So that's different kind of ask than Abbott. So I would like you to go to the next one for NAMNASA. Their request for 2 accounts. They are library book fair and conference care. So both accounts, they have pretty high balance. The first one had 3,719. The conference care has 1,262. The combined balance is 4,982. They are asking to close out those 2 accounts and transfer the balance to system-wide accounts. So.
Sorry,
this-
when you say system-wide, you mean one that it's combined for all the schools?
No.
She
For
said system-wide,
individual
but she
school.
meant school-wide.
Okay.
School-wide.
Thank you. I
Oh,
wanted to make sure.
Sorry,
No.
I should say school-wide, not
I
system-wide.
was.
Yes, because almost every single school has a school-wide
Yeah.
activity account. But we do notice there are some school, they don't have a school-wide student activity account. Like Christopherly doesn't have anything.
So one, and again, maybe to help all of you with context, and some of you have been here for a long time, this is the first time in the 10 years that I've been in the district that the school committee has ever looked at these
Yes.
accounts.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I want people to, for everybody to remember that.
I think that's helpful.
Yep.
And so this is a good process. The audit findings that we received a number of years ago was that we had too many accounts in our school activity accounts. So when I was still a principal at Stony Brook, we were asked to simplify, and everything should be in a school-wide account, with the exception of something that might have a lot of usage. And the example they always gave us was the theater account and a yearbook account, right? Because there might be a lot of money, and actually at the middle school, it was also the ski club account. Because there was a lot of money that went in and out of those specific lines. They're all under the school, they're all under the student activity accounts. But they just said, the auditor said that those are really the only ones that should have a separate line item. And as you'll see, there were line items for everything. And so that's,
some have more than others,
That's really
and-
what the
yeah.
question is coming back to is, okay, well, which ones do we keep as a separate line item, and which do we just fold into the overall student activity account? And that's where it might be different
And it doesn't have to
per
be
school.
this one-time review
Right.
forever and ever,
right.
right?
Right,
This is a
right.
stepping stone.
Right.
Like, I want to give grace to the
Right.
process that we are embarking on this multi-headed,
Right.
pick your.
Review of all of our
metaphor. Right.
funds.
Right,
We
so-
would do this at we were looking at the building level, the audit findings again, and one of the things that Jenny's already shared with you and talks about it here as well too, is that the middle schools and the academy need to have the audits more regularly because of the amount of money that they're dealing with, whereas the elementary schools don't.
Right.
But then, so we've been looking at this, but, right, just for all of you and for the general public, we've never brought this information to the school committee before, for it to be reviewed like this, which I think is a good thing moving forward, but it feels very arduous at this moment.
Yes. And just to clarify, I think we talked about these at the subcommittee meeting a couple weeks ago. The conference care, that stemmed from when there was
That was
childcare provided during
Yes.
conference,
Right.
like
But
that's
parent-teacher
right.
conferences.
Right.
with that.
Someone could have, they could.
But that was actually revolving accounts.
Okay.
Which is different than these.
Right,
but
okay,
the
so
same
that-
idea,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And I think the elementaries feel a little bit more, I don't know, messier. But like when we get to middle school, I think it's like very much more clear of, these are inactive, these will be
Yes.
closed, these are active, these will
Yeah.
be kept, so.
For one, I'm grateful that we're blowing the lid off this kitten poster thing, because it's obvious that this is where the bank is being made.
You say it here, it ends up in somebody's Facebook post or newsletter.
But just to point out.
Put a disclaimer on that.
But just to point out, as per, I think it's MGL's, any money funded by students can only be used for students. We cannot use any of this money to pay for salaries or professional development or anything like that. So this is money kind of by the students and for the students, to put that disclaimer out there.
Might encourage
it's
use
not that
of the
much,
money for
yeah.
the students then.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Jenny, thank you.
Sorry.
So do you want to go on to Chris Foley?
We just completed NASIC, and for Foley, there's also $35 for book fair, but they didn't make any requests because there's no school-wide student activity account. For day school, everything looks very clear, and also Robinson, because they only have one O'Connor student activity account. So next one is our middle school. For Blanchard Middle School, they do have some yellow highlights here. So they are recommending for those accounts to be closed because they don't have any activities for many years. The balance has been zero out for many years. Also, for Stony Brook and the next one,
Yeah.
because we haven't done that for at least 10 years, their list is really long. But the good thing is they don't have any balance. So all zero.
And that's what I was talking about. Like,
Yes.
that's what we did a number of years ago when they said, okay, we did, there was some balance in some of those
And you moved
that we
them up.
were able to move, but we don't have the authority to get rid of them.
So there's no request about the Washington DC funds.
I was about to say.
Yeah.
Well, it is still sitting there right now, yeah.
Is that being used at all for the trip that the day trip that Stony is doing? You know, so it may be called the Washington DC Fund, but that's.
That's right. I mean, again, any of those can be used for students.
Yes.
In different ways. They just need to be, and it's we'll have to look at it, yeah.
And that's essentially a build-up that there's kind of every year, if there's been a little bit left over from, incomings versus outgoings,
Oh,
that's
was
built up
That was used to scholarship students.
for
Okay.
scholarship.
That is
Oh,
what, that is
okay.
what that
For
was
kids
used
who
for.
could not
Okay.
go,
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
because a trip is like $1,200
Yeah.
or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So the last one is WA student activity account. If you see the end of WA's report, the total balance for WA student activity account is $505,764. We do observe some negative deficit accounts over here. That could be some project for WA to do in the future. That's a house cleaning item they will need to perform in the future. Because from the title of this report, you can see there are 222 categories. I'm pretty sure they don't have 222 student activity club
Right.
currently active.
Right.
So that's a project we probably need to ask for the principal, the dean, and financial assistants to work together to find out which club is active. So they need to be closed out, or if we see a deficit account over here, we need to know if they are truly deficit or just a deficit due to the timing difference. Because sometimes when we need to pay some expenditure,
Right.
so we have to pay first, then we receive those students like a payment later. So some of those deficits, they are okay because that's due to the timing difference. But
Like a snapshot.
it could be something, we do have some true deficit over there. So it's gonna be a future project for WA.
There's a one that's $4,000 in the deficit,
like
and
the
if
Spanish
that's not
club.
a timing thing, then we need to.
Right, and I just want to, again, say, we're not
Yeah.
going to have every answer to
No,
every one
no,
of
no,
these
no.
accounts tonight.
And I'm assuming, because none of these have been highlighted, WA are not asking for any of these to be closed until they've, assuming they've done this kind of thorough review that
That's
is being
correct.
planned. Okay.
Yes. We didn't receive any request from WA for any closure of account
Okay,
or any reason for those deficit accounts.
okay.
It doesn't mean, it just means this moment in time.
Yes,
It's a
right.
bigger project, and
Yeah.
the audit is coming up in June,
Right.
so.
So in addition to that, and in this memo, I also summarize and all the holding account and checking account balances by individual school. So that's on the first page of this memo. When you look into this actual data, so our purpose is to utilize the actual data to help school committee to decide what should be their maximum checking account balances. And according to DESI guideline, school committee needs to approve the maximum checking account balances annually. And from the data here we collected as of May 24, the elementary schools recommended maximum checking account balance is 7,000, middle school is 35,000, and high school is $150,000. So which does need the school committee to have a vote.
Yep.
That we've done. We have been doing that.
In the past,
Yeah.
yes.
In the past, yeah, that's what.
Yep.
I do have a question about that. The checking account, is that interest bearing at least?
Checking account, I think the holding account is interest bearing, but checking account is just serves as expenditure account.
Yeah.
Because we have the holding to receive those revenue, that function as revenue, and weekly we have the warrant process. The town help us to do a transfer from holding to checking. So that's the purpose of the holding and checking
Right,
account.
I get that.
Can I ask a very basic question, Jenny? And I'm sorry if for for maybe not knowing this. We've got a holding account balance and a checking account balance. We only approve the maximum balance of the checking account, not the holding account.
Right.
So they can hold whatever amount of money in those accounts, and
That's
we have no
correct.
purview over those.
Yes, you just approve the checking account balances. I don't know why the DESI doesn't have requirement for school committee to approve the holding account balance. You just need to approve what's the maximum they can spend from those student activity account.
Okay.
But the principal can decide what comes in and out between those accounts, the holding and the checking?
Principal, when they need to pay those bills every week, so they send all those bills to the business office, and we check every single purchase or reimbursement, making sure they are legit. And then those expenditures go to town hall. The town accountant will review that for the second time. So there's always check and balance in place. And it's always been this process is the best practice recommended by DESI as well. It's just checking account. I was wondering why it doesn't
It just seems that
require the
there's
holding
such,
account.
yeah, because there just seems such big differences between the elementary schools, you know, and you don't like seeing big balances per se popping up there.
My only other question on the checking account balance is, I'm going to pick on the high school because that's a big number, and that's a significant difference in interest. How often is it that they're paying $150,000 in the course of 1 week?
So they don't usually pay 150,000 like yesterday. The checking account balance was 40,000, but today they made a transfer for $96,000. So now the checking account has $135,000. Doesn't mean every single week we will have like 150,000. So we are talking about the maximum account balance for that account.
Right, and I appreciate the fact that that's the limit and it's not what we have to keep there. It's just, again, if there's not a need to have an extra $90,000 there to pay something now, that's, again, $90,000 that's earning interest towards those accounts.
The bigger problem is if you have a bill that requires a check for $150,000, if you haven't allowed $150,000 to live in that account, they can't pay that check. So to me, that's the bigger issue, is that.
Yeah, so it would be a transient 150 basically.
Right, like
transferred and
we have DECA program, we have water program. So if they have to pay it out, like all students' air tickets, all those travel expenditure, that could be really high expenditure for this warrant. But next one, it could be just $20,000. So we are asking for the approval for the maximum balance.
Thank you.
So I think I would just then hope that there's a best practice of not keeping too much of an excess in the non-interest bearing. And again, I know that it doesn't help the town budget and everything,
Not,
but,
yeah, at all.
but it certainly helps offset costs in the future if we are getting interest towards these activities, so.
You're potentially not asking families to pay as much in fees and stuff. If you're spending it, if you're managing it wisely,
Correct.
you know, you can maybe lessen the ask on families, which does make a difference.
And then, are you at recommendation 3 for the audit?
Lastly, I'm going to talk about the student activity account audit, and DESI guidelines state that we have to undergo a formal external audit every 3 years for any school with the expenditure over $25,000. Because we had our last audit in fiscal year 20, so we are due for the next one for fiscal year 23. We already scheduled the audit on June 10th, which is basically a week from today. And recognizing, yes, we are going down to high school, hopefully to help to get all the documentation ready for the audit, because the first year will be high school and the second year will be middle school and elementary schools. So recognizing, and we observe some reconciliation discrepancy from fiscal year 20's audit report. We are trying to take some actions to our practice, so we are hoping to make some improvement in the future. And based on the recommendation by the school committee member and Dr. Chu, so currently we are exploring the possibility if we can hire an outside consultant during the summertime to help us to resolve the discrepancy from the previous year carryover. And going forward, so we would like to take some action as well. And we will ask our Assistant Finance Director, Irene Masaki, to go down to each school building on a monthly basis. Hopefully we can provide them some either training or assistance on the reconciliation process. Our goal is to help them to establish the monthly routine reconciliation process going forward.
Thank you. And then recommendation 4 is just to, speaks to the recommendation to close some inactive accounts. So if we want to jump back as a committee back up to number 1, which is a request to approve basically the lists of all the accounts at this time.
The active ones. Is it?
I think that strikes me as the whole list, and then the other vote would be
Yes.
the
Okay.
active.
Okay.
Yeah.
Approve the establishment of
Yeah.
the accounts.
Any thoughts or questions on that specific vote? I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay, thanks. And then recommendation 2 is the maximum account balances, as Jenny explained. Any final thoughts or questions on that specific vote?
Just to clarify, the finance subcommittee discussed this, and this is
This is our recommendation.
your recommendation as well with Jenny, yeah.
So the maximum balances, did that come actually to finance subcommittee?
Yes, we did.
Okay,
Yep.
Before.
okay, great, yep. Motion on that one, please,
Motion so moved.
and a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? So the third one is to recommend that Roselli, Clark and Associates CPA firm will be engaged to conduct the FY23 student activity accounts audit for all school levels, high school this year starting in June, and then middle school and elementary schools next summer. A motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay, so then the last one left for discussion would be which accounts to close based on school suggestions or, as we've heard, some desire for consistency. I guess my personal view on this would be to recognize that this is this big project that we are making forward progress on. I think we're in sort of the messy middle, and I guess I wouldn't want to go down a path that we aren't totally, that we haven't thoroughly vetted yet. So I guess I would recommend sort of tabling this to the finance subcommittee.
My only other suggestion might be that if you wanted to take action on the inactive accounts,
Right.
because the confusion is only
Okay.
in the,
Anything
should this
that-
be a revolving account? They were like, how should we qualify this? But you do have some clear, this is inactive, zero,
The zero
at least
balance.
at least at the middle school
We
level.
could do the
even.
middle school
Yeah.
inactive
You could-
accounts.
You could kind of wait,
If that feels more clear to everybody.
yeah. And then you're right, I think you want,
So,
you're now aware of it, you've established it.
I mean,
And so
yeah,
now we'll
there-
take some time to actually look at the elementary schools. We'll get the
Yeah.
information
And we want to
from
be
the
a partner
academy.
in that, and, yeah.
Right.
so I see 3 different categories. I see the zero balance inactives. I see the negative balance that would be closed out from the general activity account. And I see the ones that may be inactive but have a balance. Those are 3 different groups that might be
My
different.
understanding is the ones with the deficit
Would be-
at WA, we can't touch
Right,
for
WA
now
is not, right,
until
but-
they
But there were some in
work
the
through
elementary that were.
I would
identified.
recommend we don't touch WA at all.
Yeah.
I think we could start, the lowest hanging fruit feels like the middle school inactive zero balance
They
ones.
they both identified
They're
the
highlighted.
zero out inactive accounts.
Yep, they're highlighted in the memo. Any last thoughts on approving the closure of the middle school identified inactive accounts? Or a motion?
So
So
moved.
moved, yeah.
Thank you. And second?
Second.
Any last questions on that? Or on what we're voting on? Okay, all in favor? And WA is separate.
Yeah.
So the last piece of action would be on elementary, which I think that would fit to me to be sort of followed up on in the finance subcommittee.
Unless we want to let them clean up the negatives at the bare minimum. That seems like a fairly easy.
Right, for Miller School.
Like Miller has a negative $9 line.
But if, all right.
But then,
So
what do you mean clean that up? Because the idea is that
It's
you would
take it from
transfer
the-
it to another.
the school-wide.
So it's negative $9.12. So if you close that, is it you reduce the school-wide activities by $9.12? Is that how you?
Yeah, just
Yes.
offset with
You
the.
offset it.
But then is there no
positive-
longer, I guess my question is there no longer a field day account?
No. There's nothing.
There's not.
Or it's there as a zero.
Well, and I think that would be the point, is that they don't believe that they need a separate account
Yeah.
for this. It doesn't mean that they're not gonna have a field day. It means right now they can't close it out because there's
Yeah.
there's
There's
a
a
number
deficit.
attached to it. I think that's kind of what they're trying to do, is for their purposes, if you did vote on this, then they wouldn't have that separate account. They still have student activity funds to support a field day in the future.
Yeah. I guess to me, though, I still see like a field day at NAB and a field day at one of the other
But
schools.
this speaks to the difference of which, like, honestly,
That's why I
some
was
of,
saying,
some of
like-
the financial administrative assistants have
Yeah.
been in each school longer as well, too.
Okay.
And they have a little bit better kind of understanding of what, really what the previous audits have suggested. So back to the original point where this is now gonna take us just a little bit longer to get that consistency
Right.
between the schools.
So what I would like, I think your idea of bringing at least the elementary things to the finance subcommittee, because I actually think it would be, I mean, I know we've got the library book fair thing to figure out of whether it's a revolving account, but I would like to see if we can bring some consistency to the elementary schools
Right.
with the various names of the accounts. I know there might always be kind of one or two, but we've such a vast difference in names and accounts across the elementary schools. I think even if we have staff who are moving between schools, or, you know, for school committee members, I think it would make sense that we could look at bringing some kind of consistency.
And that's why I was like, well,
Yeah.
it seems like there's other accounts that have it as field day, and so eliminating it here might not make sense in the long term.
Exactly.
Right.
That's all I was saying.
Which kind of does mean, even though I think Tom's point too,
Yeah.
you could just take action on it. I think Miller
action,
just
leave it,
has a
yeah.
more clear ask for you right now.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you are better to just kind of leave all the elementary schools as they are and then bring it to, have the deeper conversation with the subcommittee and then come up with that
Can I ask one
recommendation.
other question? What's money market, by the way? It's listed in
It's just a different
Investment.
savings.
just a different savings.
It-
Usually earns better interest.
That's what I was gonna say.
Usually.
I don't know. It's, I don't know, I guess my thought is still just to leave Miller alone. If it's been there before, it can wait until finance committee.
Right, you're really just delaying, it's not
Yeah,
that you're
well,
gonna not.
and
do
it's like,
something.
why, singling that one out, like, there's one at Abbott that's negative, that
So I
wants to
just
be
picked on that
inactive.
particular one, that was all.
I guess
I'm with Valerie.
I would rather like kind of leave this as like its own box that we have recognized, put it seat with it at the table, and we'll open that up.
later.
Yeah. So that would make we took a vote on the middle school inactive, so that's
Yeah.
done. Okay, thank you.
All set.
I know that was
Any other questions?
a lot.
Can I just double check in terms of the timing with the WA thing? This doesn't impact the building of our FY26 budget because there's student activities account.
No.
So, you know, what we could be asking is that this time next year, if this is the time we kind of are going to be reviewing these accounts, that we would be expecting to see a kind of a much more updated, streamlined, kind of in place. A
Yeah.
finished product, the finished
Well,
product?
Finished? I mean, these have
yeah.
happened over decades,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And many other employees and predecessors, and so I just want to give grace to the business office that's, you know, trying to support the school level staff, that we've recognized a problem, we know we're working on it, and we'll hopefully have an improvement by next year. I don't know if it's like the shiny final version.
Forward
that's all.
momentum and better housekeeping.
Right.
It's, I mean, we removed, this isn't we can't be done with this in a year, but we're
Well,
gonna
no,
be-
in terms of removing inactive accounts and kind of,
Yeah.
and figuring out the deficits at WA, I mean, whatever about processes and training, but
Yeah.
I would think in 12 months, we could anticipate at least,
I think the audit will be helpful for
Right.
Yeah,
deputies.
and also, again, just one more piece of context
Yeah.
for all of you. You might all be aware of this. I know some of you are. One of the things, though, too, that changed a number of years ago, even though it had been a practice in some buildings, but not necessarily all the buildings, was that the SACs at each building do actually review the student activity accounts with the principals as well, too. So the idea that this is the first time it's coming to the school committee, it was just, everything was happening with the student activity accounts at the building level,
Yeah.
which speaks to why there's some, you know, differences in the way things are done, but
Oh, yeah.
the SACs, the School Advisory Council, that helps develop the school improvement plan, in addition to developing the school improvement plan, reviewing, they don't vote on it, they don't have, they don't have authority over the school.
they just review it.
But they review it, so it's just another thing for people to know, if somebody's sitting out there going, why has this never been looked at? It has, it just hasn't come to the school committee.
And they would only see their
They
school,
would
so
just see
they're
their
not
school.
getting the
That's
bigger
right.
picture
That's
like
right.
we are.
Right.
And it would be interesting to see how some of these balances track over years too. If they're just going up, you know, well, then maybe there is some encouragement of, you know, advisors, maybe you can invest in your club a little bit more through these accounts, and helping them understand what is acceptable expenses for it.
When would that audit, then, that's happening on June 10th, how long does that typically take, Jenny, or when would we expect to get information
A couple
back?
days.
Oh, okay. So over the summer, we should get a final report at some point? Or
It depends for their audit firm schedule. If they have lots of clients, sometimes we have to wait for a couple months.
Okay.
And because all the CPA firm, they are really busy during the summertime for like different kind of audits.
Sure.
Well, depends on how many recommendations they're making.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jenny. Really appreciate it.
so much, Jenny. Thank you.
Right before adjournment, I'll just point out the personnel update in the packet is sobering, in black and white, to see
I think so.
level of separation. What?
Sorry, you said the word adjournment, so we did have one more.
Oh, yeah.
In the personnel piece, we did.
Okay, sure, yep, sorry.
So Valerie, as you were saying,
Yes, 3 pages
yeah,
of.
3 pages of staff
Unfortunate.
members who will not, well, most of them won't be with us for next year. There are some, these are busy times of the year anyway.
Yep.
And so there are some good stories that happen when people separate, whether their family is relocating, whether they're accepting different positions in other districts, like we've talked about in the last few weeks with some of our assistant principals moving on to higher positions, which are all great. But the majority of the separations that you're seeing tonight is definitely a result of the budget situation that we're in. As I scan down some of the names, not all members might have received a RIF, they might have received a reduction in their FTE.
Mm-hmm.
And so or a different assignment that possibly they didn't feel met their satisfaction or their skill set, and so they were looking for another job as well. So some separated on their own, knowing kind of what the forecast of our district looked like. So we will continue to plug away with our staffing and do the best that we can there. The ESP positions that you're seeing in there are usually, they've moved on for other reasons. We have not riffed any of those. Also in your packet tonight, you will see a job description for the executive assistant position. And that position was briefly discussed during our budget cycle as well, when we discussed collapsing our data management specialist into this executive assistant role, which Kathy Mucci has led quite nicely for half of the year at this point. And so you can see that in the job responsibilities, we have combined the leadership responsibilities that the executive assistant has with supporting the superintendent, supporting the school committee, and also taking the very important role of being able to report back to all of our state reporting. What has been wonderful for us this year is the amount of training that Kathy has been able to turn around and give to our schools, because coming from Stony Brook School, she understands that workings and what her administrative assistants colleagues need to know in order to pull these pieces together. So she's had a very interesting vantage point and has been able to help us along where we're in very good standing to complete our end of the year report, much better so than last year. And so with that, we are looking for an approval over the next 2 weeks to accept this new position of executive assistant.
Yep.
So it's really it's a reclassification of the administrative assistant to the superintendent's position to an executive assistant, and it's bringing that data specialist piece and those
Merged.
components to it. So
Yeah.
it's
not an added-
It's not a new.
Yeah,
It is
it's
not
not
an
an
added position.
Okay. Great, thank you. We will add that to our June 17th agenda for vote, and if anyone has feedback in the meantime, we can channel that to Courtney.
Be great, thank you.
Can I ask just one question?
Mhm.
With obviously us losing Magali Ronan, who was over equity curriculum instruction, do we need to be updating other job descriptions based on those? Because those are still obviously, I mean, the curriculum instruction, I know.
Yeah.
We're taking a look at our kind of organizational structure
Okay.
to see what makes sense
Okay.
for each of us to pick up tasks that are
Okay.
associated with that position. There might be other areas that we might need a small amount of support, but I don't see that as building a new position
Or changing a job
or
description.
changing a job description.
When do you think, though, that you might have that information? Because I do think it's important, for our community members and families to kind of understand who's kind of over that purview. I know, for example, even just being on the town DEI committee, they really appreciated knowing that Magali was their contact or liaison regarding all DEI and equity issues. So I think it would be important to kind of bring some of that clarity to our community members regarding those responsibilities and where they're going to go.
And I think that speaks back to the CPAT also.
CPAC as well.
You know, the clarity of who's in what roles.
Right.
So-
I mean, in many ways, one of the things we have talked about, yes, Magali was able to be a sort of liaison to the DEI team or the committee for the town. But one of the things that we talked about, even in creating that position, was that we're acknowledging still that as a superintendent, I'm the chief equity officer for the district. And so that will continue. And so some of these things are basically going to be on my shoulders and Courtney's shoulders. Where we will be leading the curriculum coordinators. We will, they will continue to be doing the equity work that they've been doing through their lenses within the curriculum work. But much of that much of that's going to be the two of us. Yeah.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor?